We live in interesting times. Today's stories. Canada's Prime Minister has the world's attention, but not in a flattering way. Volunteers who helped in Ottawa's spring flood are being recognized. A $1 trillion drug hangover. In Syria, prices for consumer goods change hourly, but there are no discounts. A relaxing summer school on the beaches of Cyprus. There's a population explosion at the world's largest oil refinery. Millions rally worldwide in the fight against climate change. A new transit option for Ottawa commuters. Maurice the Rooster has won his court case. Wildlife waddles around a coffee shop in China. Scientists say the Loch Ness monster probably doesn't exist. In sports, Canada drops a warm-up match to the USA in Rugby World Cup play. And there was UFC action in Vancouver. I'm Thomas I. Likeness with Eagle News, broadcasting from our Edmonton studio, bringing you stories from around the globe. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's past has come back to haunt him, and the timing couldn't be worse. Now Trudeau is 1 week into an election campaign in which he's seeking a second term as the country's leader. Time magazine has published a photo of him wearing brown face makeup at an Arabian Nights-themed party 18 years ago at a private school where he taught. Trudeau has also admitted to wearing blackface makeup in his teens when he sang Harry Belafonte's 1956 hit Banana Boat Song in a high school talent contest. And broadcaster Global News has released images of Trudeau in ripped jeans and a t-shirt, his arms up, wearing blackface makeup. With his Liberal Party campaign in damage control mode, Trudeau faced reporters at a campaign stop in Winnipeg. He was clearly embarrassed about the situation.
I never talked about this. Quite frankly, I was embarrassed. It was not something that represents the person I've become, the leader I try to be, and it was really embarrassing.
Trudeau was the poster child for tolerance and acceptance, but now that golden boy image has been tarnished. He admitted he hurt people who thought he was an ally, adding that he failed to see how his actions affected people because of the privileged life he has led.
It is something that people who live with the kind of discrimination that far too many people do because of the color of their skin, or their history, or their origins, or their language, or their religion, face on a regular basis. And I didn't see that from the layers of privilege that I have.
Trudeau was asked whether he attended other events wearing blackface. He did not give a definitive answer.
I am wary of being definitive about this because the recent pictures that came out I had not remembered. And I think the question is, how can you not remember that? The fact is, I didn't understand how hurtful this is to people who live with discrimination every single day.
New Democratic Party leader Jagmeet Singh, who's a practicing Sikh, says he's disappointed with Trudeau and calls on the Prime Minister to explain why he did that. Singh adds that it's becoming clear that Trudeau's public persona may not be an accurate reflection of who he really is. Phone lines to radio talk shows were lit up as average Canadians reacted to Trudeau. Some defended him, saying it happened nearly 2 decades ago. Others were not as forgiving. Here's a sampling of the reaction on the streets of Winnipeg.
I mean, it's not right even 20 years ago if it was supposed to be as a costume. It's not something that you should actually do. But, if he apologized for it and he acknowledged it, and I think as the Prime Minister, it was the right thing to do to acknowledge it. I mean, it was 20 years ago.
If you look at it more clear-headed, nowadays it would be seen as cultural appropriation or whatever. But in that era, in that time, that was not the case, and like it seems a little bit blown out of proportion to take somebody, to hold him responsible for that.
And it wasn't purposely done. He probably didn't have the knowledge about it to know the history behind blackface, but now that he's known about it and apologized for it, I think it will change other people's views on it, on him.
One commentator said Trudeau should back up his apology with action. He suggested the Prime Minister give a written explanation of why he thought it was okay to do what he did 19 years ago, and he said Trudeau should then follow that up with a second letter explaining what changed his mind that his past actions were inappropriate. It has been said that disaster and hard times can bring out the best in people. That happened this past spring in Ottawa, when residents of the city had to cope with flooding from heavy rain. Now, the mayor of the city has tipped his hat to all of those who helped out. As well as first responders, ordinary citizens and groups, including members of the Church of Christ, rolled up their sleeves to help mitigate the damage. Eagle News correspondent Andre Lejoie files this report.
Residents of Gatineau gathered in Place de la Cité to pay tribute to the volunteers of spring flood of 2019, Rendez-vous des Héros, and to explore the emergency services provided by the city.
The spring flood of 2019 reached its peak water levels more than that the 2017, affecting both cities of Ottawa and Gatineau and nearby communities. This is due to rapid snowmelt, surge of water levels in the Ottawa River, and massive rainfall. Hundreds of Canadian troops and volunteers are gathered at the time to fill sandbags, and when the flood receded, volunteers gathered again to clear out sandbags in the areas affected by the flood. In the spring flood, members of the Church of Christ are quick in giving helping hand to both cities of Ottawa and Gatineau by volunteering, filling up sandbags, and also in clearing out thousands of sandbags. Check donations were also given by the Church of Christ to Moisson Outaouais and Jutami. Those are shelters and food banks who provided services to residents affected by the flood. The mayor recognized the effort and generosity of the members of the Church of Christ in helping to the community which they serve.
Mayor of Gatineau, Mayor Maxime Penneau-Jobin, acknowledges the efforts of the firefighters, police officers, paramedics, and citizens volunteers, which includes the members of the Church of Christ in Nepean at time calamity.
We decided to organize this to say thank you to all the volunteers that did an amazing job during the floodings. We had many people that suffered a lot, and because of those volunteers, there was a lot less suffering.
Puis, what's the next big step right now for the people in Gatineau that they got flooded or?
Yeah, the victims are in a difficult situation right now because things are better in their houses, and most of them got reimbursements. It's way better than in 1917. Yes, the issue now is what do we do with those areas, and that's a lot of thinking from the Quebec government. There are 8 ministries that are together trying to figure out a plan for the areas that were affected all over Quebec, and that's going to take months. And for the people living in those areas, it's a lot of uncertainty for many months, if not years. So that's also a tough period that they'll have to go through.
And what is the needs right now for the city to help the people during for the flood victims?
The direct help is almost finished. We have about 25 families that are still in hotels or in accommodations provided by the Red Cross. and 4 or 5 from the tornado. So that's approximately 30 families that are still being helped, but we have all the resources for that.
The Church of Christ was once again recognized for the humanitarian efforts that we helped in all of the previous activities here in the city of Gatineau, led by our executive minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, in following what is recorded in the Holy Scriptures in Proverbs 3:27. Whenever we possibly can, do good to those who need it. And with the help and mercy of our Almighty God, we helped those who are in need in the recent floodings here in this city. We also helped in giving food donations to those who are also in need of those things. And we likewise help them to understand the truth upheld inside the Church of Christ.
And please allow me to say a special thanks to all the volunteers of the Church of Christ. There were a few hundreds that participated in the tornado and the flooding, and so they were on the ground with us and they gave us a big help. So thank you to all those volunteers.
Emergency services provided by the City of Gatineau were presented today to the residents that they would know what to do in case something happened. Simulations of emergency were cooking fire, extinguished after an accident, fire outbreaks, and evacuation by the firehouse of the Ottawa Fire Department, and while driving while intoxicated and affected extinction of fire for children of all ages.
I'm André Lajoie in Gatineau, Quebec. For Eagle News, I am 1 with 25.
What is the cost of opioid addiction? In the United States, the human cost has been estimated at more than 400,000 lives. These are lives lost to overdoses in the last 20 years. Now, in monetary terms, this translates to at least $1 trillion. During that same period, pharmaceutical companies making these addictive painkillers banked billions in profits. And while the flood of prescription opioids into the black market has now been curtailed, addicts are turning to heroin and highly potent fentanyl, where the risk of overdose and death is even higher. One company, Purdue Pharma, has filed bankruptcy in an attempt to stop further legal action against it. Now, part of that settlement will see the company provide more than $10 billion to help tackle addiction. An American health policy professor, Stephen Ullman, comments on Purdue's motives.
Well, the pharmaceutical company, Purdue, is tending to limit its liability. The realization is if it can make a deal now, it can sort of cut the losses that it might in turn basically have to deal with.
Ullman pegs the monetary cost to his country at $1 trillion over the last 2 decades. Ullman, who's with the University of Miami, says the money Purdue will put up sounds like a lot, but really it isn't.
The $10 billion, in terms of the scheme of things, is not necessarily that large. Since 2001, where we basically started focusing on opioids as a way to deal with pain in hospitals and healthcare facilities and healthcare systems, the cost of the opioid epidemic has amounted to about $1 trillion. So $10 billion is not a great amount relative to the $1 trillion.
The cases against Purdue seek to address the costs of millions of Americans sinking into addiction after using opioid painkillers that doctors freely and often criminally prescribed over the past 2 decades. Part of Purdue's deal sees the company providing communities with addiction treatment drugs at no or low cost to help tackle the crisis. Ullman says it's essential to deal with the social costs of this epidemic.
The fight has been very frustrating for those who are involved with it. The realization is that opioid addiction is extremely significant in terms of how it impacts people and how they cannot get off of these drugs.
The latest figures available from the Centers for Disease Control and Infection are from 2017. The center says that year, 47,000 Americans died of opioid overdoses. We now move to a part of the world often referred to as the cradle of civilization, the Middle East. The nation of Syria has been war-torn since 2011, when a civil war began. The death toll from that conflict stands at about 400,000. The conflict has decimated the economy. What is life like for people who cannot escape the unrest, and for those who want to remain in the country of their birth? In central Damascus, the nation's capital, shopkeepers are struggling. Business has slowed as the Syrian pound has fallen against the US dollar to historic lows. Shopkeeper Mohammed Zakari sells spices and herbs, and he says the currency is constantly dropping. He says when he falls asleep, goods are at one price, but when he wakes up, the cost has gone up. All of this is due to the falling value of the country's currency, the Syrian pound. Now, this will give you an idea of just how bad things are. At the start of Syria's 8-year war, the exchange rate stood at around 48 pounds to the US dollar. Recently, it was trading at 691 against the dollar, the lowest rate in history. Grocer Hussein Hamou says his customers are growing skeptical of his prices because of the stark and swift changes. He says they're surprised that prices vary from hour to hour. Hamou says instead of his customers buying supplies for a month as they usually do, many are opting for smaller quantities to make up for the price hikes. With all of the chaos, conflict, and turmoil in the world, let's take a moment to relax. I want to show you a summer school. Now, this isn't a place where you go to learn. It's a school of fish that makes an annual appearance every summer. For this visual story, we go to the southeast Mediterranean island of Cyprus. Every year, a school of fish known as hardy-head silverside invade the Cypriot shores to reproduce. The larger ones are making their appearance this month and next. They vary in size, with the biggest between 10 and 18 centimeters. The fish live on a diet of plankton. Very relaxing images. Still to come, thousands of workers are trying to repair the damage at the bombed-out oil refinery in Saudi Arabia. Climate change protests worldwide. Riding the rails in Ottawa. Maurice the rooster has something to crow about. And a cafe in China has its ducks in a row. You're watching Eagle News. This is Eagle News. In Saudi Arabia, the workforce at the bombed-out refinery has increased by about 600% in the last week. About 6,000 workers are trying to get the plant running at full capacity by the end of the month. Normally, there are just over 100 workers on site. The plant was badly damaged in a drone strike earlier this month. Badly warped thick metal piping, peppered with shrapnel, lies strewn around the plant site. The Saudis claim that 30% of the plant was operational within 24 hours of the initial strikes. Industry analyst Alex Schindler of Energy Intelligence Group says restoring production capacity to 11 million barrels per day by the end of the month is an ambitious target given the amount of repairs required. The refinery produced about 6% of the world's oil supply. Around the world, millions of children left their books at home and skipped school last Friday to take part in a global strike against climate change. Organizers say some 4 million people filled city streets worldwide in what was billed as the biggest ever protest against the threat posed to the planet by rising temperatures. Youngsters and adults alike chanted slogans and waved placards in demonstrations that started in Asia and the Pacific. The rallies spread across Africa, Europe, and Latin America, before culminating in the United States, where teen activist Greta Thunberg rallied. Thunberg was in New York, where she claimed 250,000 people protested. Strike organizers say the rallies were the start of 5,800 protests across 163 countries over the next week. From Berlin to Boston, Kampala to Kiribati, Seoul to Sao Paulo, protesters brandished signs with slogans including, "There is no Planet B," and "Make the Earth Great Again." Commuters in the Canadian capital of Ottawa have another way of getting around the city. As Eagle News correspondent Rosalie Castro reports, the city now has rapid transit.
The O Train, Ottawa Train, Confederation Line, Light Rail Transit finally opens its doors for full service in the city of Ottawa this weekend. Construction began in 2013, and according to the city, it is a state-of-the-art LRT system and the Ottawa's largest transportation infrastructure project since the building of the Rideau Canal.
The $2.1 billion project replaces existing diesel-powered buses routing around the city, running from 12.5 kilometers with 13 stations from Blair Road to Tony's Pasture and a 2.5 kilometers underground tunnel in downtown core. The transit system has been a challenge to the city as Ottawa's population continues to grow and rural areas and suburban areas continues to develop. According to the City of Ottawa, transit through downtown accommodates 9,500 to 10,000 customers per direction during peak hours, and the city estimates that ridership is going to grow rapidly over the next 2 decades.
Just to show support, it's a grand opening, a long time coming for OC Transpo, the transit system here in Ottawa. Just wanted to come out here. You know, we're handing out free tickets to Ottawa Red Blacks game, Red Blacks Fury, as well as the 67s. Just kind of showing our support and getting involved in the community.
The new LRT will help reduce congestion and will provide quick and efficient access to commuters. The increase in capacity will accommodate 300 passengers per car. With the development of the Confederation Line, this created jobs and sustainability for the citizens of Ottawa. It is a zero-emission light rail train, reducing road vehicle emissions each year and tons of greenhouse gases and criteria air contaminants. According to the city, the zero-emission electric trains reduces carbon dioxide by approximately 38,000 tons per year by 2031, the equivalent of taking 7,300 cars off the street. The city purchased 34 fully electric Alstom Cytadis Spirit cars designed with maximum vehicle speed of 100 kilometers an hour and an average operating speed is 35 kilometers an hour, decreases the amount of travel time.
They advertise that you can take your bicycle on it, but you can take it on the elevator coming into the station, but they have a little kind of thing that you can put on the stairs, but it doesn't work very well. And then on the train itself, there's actually nowhere to put the bicycle. You're just going to stand in the middle with the bicycle, and it's the same for people who have strollers as well. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like it was designed for people. I don't know how wheelchairs will go on it either, but I think it'll be a little bit difficult for people that have anything other than themselves to go on.
According to Alstom, manufacturer of Cytadis, the LRT system is designed to meet the specific needs of North American cities. Cytadis Spirit is specifically tailored to deal with extreme climate conditions faced by some North American cities, such as Ottawa, with standing temperatures as low as minus 38 degrees.
I am Rosalie Castro in Ottawa for Eagle News Service. I am 1 with 25.
Some animal stories now. First, the tale of Maurice the rooster. He has something to crow about. A French court has cleared Maurice of any wrongdoing. Seems his constant cock-a-doodle-doo annoyed newcomers to the countryside on the island of Oléron, where the rooster and his owner live. So they took the matter to court. This neighborhood quarrel has become a symbol of tensions between locals and out-of-towners who have moved to the French countryside. Maurice's owner, Corinne Fassot, says the new arrivals have complained about everything from, well, a rooster crowing, cows with bells, a frog croaking, a baby crying. Something she says are all normal noises. She says if people can't accept that, they shouldn't move to the countryside. Fassot says she fought for 2 years to settle the issue and hopes people will think twice before going to court for such frivolous matters. While going to court about animals is about the last thing on the minds of these customers at this cafe in the southwestern Chinese city of Chengdu. Crowds at this eatery are ignoring their drinks and admiring 4 fluffy white ducks that are waddling around from table to table. Now, for a little more than 10 cents, patrons can spend up to 90 minutes with the ducks, who don't seem to mind the attention. Now, these aren't any ordinary ducks. The birds are a domesticated breed from Europe known as call ducks, and they're not cheap. They sell for about $1,400 each. Visitors to the cafe can also spend time with the newest arrivals, 2 miniature teacup pigs. These critters fit neatly inside a pink miniature shopping trolley. Animal cafes are one of the latest trends in China. Up next, new evidence suggests that the fabled Loch Ness Monster may be just that, a fable. And in sports, the USA defeats Canada in a warm-up match for the Rugby World Cup, and the UFC visits Vancouver. You're watching Eagle News. This is Eagle News. I'm Thomas I. Likeness. Well, say it ain't so. We're now being told the fabled Loch Ness Monster of Scottish folklore probably does not exist. A new study by scientists suggests whatever is residing in the lake in the Scottish Highlands is probably a giant eel. Now, a bit of history about Nessie. Tales of a giant creature lurking beneath the murky waves of Loch Ness in Scotland have been around for more than 1,500 years, and these have been fueled by occasional sightings of the so-called monster. Theories abound about the true nature of the Loch Ness Monster, everything from a malevolent shape-shifting water horse to an aquatic survivor of the dinosaur age. Others attribute the phenomena to logs, fish, wading birds, or simply waves which have been blown out of all proportion. Professor Neil Jamel doesn't believe there's a monster in the lake.
Let's get down to it. Is there a plesiosaur in Loch Ness? No. There is absolutely no evidence of any reptilian sequences in our samples. So I think we can be fairly sure that there is probably not a giant scaly reptile swimming around in Loch Ness.
Jamel says scientists have sampled the water around the sightings of Nessie and found DNA from eels.
Now, is it possible that what people are seeing is a giant eel? Well, maybe. We don't know if the eel DNA that we are detecting is gigantic, from a gigantic eel, or just many small eels.
But some believers, like Adrian Shine, founder of the Loch Ness Centre, don't accept the professor's findings.
The modern theories are nothing to do with prehistoric monsters and everything to do with fish, whether it be sturgeon, catfish, or eels, as we've heard today. And in that particular case, everything is still on the table.
Steve Feltham describes himself as a Loch Ness Monster watcher. He says the debate is far from over.
It's interesting. It's an interesting exercise, but the hunt goes on, really. The hunt does go on, and I'll pretty much guarantee you that in the next couple of weeks, somebody will have a good photograph of something to be debated.
The last reported sighting of Nessie was on March 26th of last year by a U.S. couple standing on the ramparts of the majestic ruin of the Urquhart Castle. Turning to sports, a disappointing outing for Canada at a Rugby World Cup warm-up match. We have details from Eagle News correspondent Anthony Sevilla.
Canada hosted the United States in the final tune-up match ahead of the 2019 Rugby World Cup in Japan later this month. It was a hard-fought battle between the two nations, but it was USA who came out on top, defeating Canada 20-15.
Canada were red hot coming out of the tunnel with 2 quick tries to start the match. It was a slow start for the Americans, who gave up plenty of penalties and errors, but USA would answer back with a few tries of their own, cutting the lead to just 2 to end the half. Team Canada were unable to capitalize on penalties and errors as they continued to draw closer to the goal line, but could not finish for a try. USA eventually would gain back momentum, coming back from a 12-point deficit to hold Canada until the final buzzer. Despite almost giving up a hard-fought match against Canada, USA showed their respect to the Canadians. They also shared their thoughts on what they needed to learn from the match as they look forward to the upcoming World Cup.
It did feel good to get a win. You know, it's a warm-up match before the World Cup, so working hard. Man, we've been in camp for quite a bit now, and just trying to get some good momentum. So we'll take the win, but a lot to work on. Canada, I think their crowd backed them, so they came out with a bunch of confidence. There's a lot of big hits in the first half. Felt like we were just absorbing all the pressure, and then second half try to get some tries in with the ball in hand. So
we can't be making errors like that and giving penalties away and giving teams like Canada field position where they can play and put us under pressure. And I think with respect, you know, in our pool, I think if we do that against the teams we're going to play against, it's going to be a very long night. So that's the lessons that we've got to learn out of tonight. It just seems that, you know, we get it right on occasions and then we slip back into a comfort zone. And I suppose all teams do that, but yeah, we've got a lot of work to do.
Canada showed their frustration after the loss, who as a nation have not beaten the United States since 2013. Despite the result, the Canadians were optimistic and mentioned the hard work that needs to be done in order to be successful.
Yeah, really frustrating. We're probably going to be happy when we think back to 5 or 6 weeks ago when we played them and the improvements we made, but we're still not quite at the place we want to be, and we don't have much time, so it's going to have to be a couple weeks of hard work and get ourselves in the right spot to hopefully tip over Italy. Yeah, the message is pretty clear. We need 2 wins, and we need to have a hell of a game against South Africa and New Zealand just to make ourselves proud. So it's pretty clear messages. We're all on the same page.
I think as a team you can tell that our preparation has been a lot better than it was for that first US game a month or so ago. You know, we're getting better each week, but it is just those little things that we need to improve on to make sure we go from second place to first place.
The pre-World Cup schedule for both nations come to a close as they will travel to Japan for the 2019 Rugby World Cup later this month. USA will compete in Pool C together with Tonga, Argentina, France, and England. The 21st ranked Canadians will have a much difficult road ahead as they compete in Pool B that features powerhouses South Africa and the New Zealand All Blacks. Anthony Sevilla, Eagle News, 1 with 25.
The UFC paid a visit to Vancouver. More on that from Eagle News correspondent Paul Allegado.
Tonight marks the UFC's second fight card in Vancouver. The main event features Justin the Highlight Gaethje and Donald Cowboy Cerrone, both vying to be the next contender for the lightweight title. The main event bout started tentatively as Donald Cerrone and Justin Gaethje showed respect for each other in the first minute. Cerrone started to open up with strikes as the round progressed, and Gaethje responded in kind. As the fighters got more comfortable in the fight, both traded punches and kicks. Near the end of the first round, Gaethje caught Cerrone stepping in and took advantage with a rocking right hand. As Cerrone fell to the mat, Gaethje continued to rain down punches until the referee stopped the bout with only seconds left, declaring Gaethje the winner by TKO. Cerrone took a few minutes to get up after the fight, but he showed no signs of immediate injury. He went over and congratulated Gaethje, then announced to the crowd how difficult it was to fight a friend. In the post-fight interview, Cerrone elaborated on that statement.
I guess you were going to pass the torch. It's cool to pass it to someone that you knew and kind of trained and growing up, but on the second half, I don't feel like I passed the torch yet. I feel like, I wish more people in the sport were friendly. Do it for all the right reasons. You know what I mean? Remember my dad used to tell me when I was a kid, Cowboy, I used to get in fights. If only you use your powers for good instead of evil, you could really do something with your life, you know? And I'm like, and now here I am trying to preach good word to do that.
Gaethje was equally complimentary of Cerrone as a friend and fellow fighter.
Oh man, it's great, man. I'm a fan of him, man. I've been watching this for a very long time. He's been around for a very long time. Most wins, most finishes, most bonuses. He's a 1,000% sure to be a Hall of Famer. So yeah, to get that kind of credit means a lot.
After the fight, Gaethje made his case to fight current champion Khabib Nurmagomedov for the lightweight title. How does he think he would match up with Nurmagomedov?
He probably beats me if you put it on paper, but man, I hit so hard, I kick so hard, and I'm so athletic. I won't try and the way you stop a takedown in wrestling is to meet force with force. You don't try to go away. Once you're on I won't touch the cage. If he's going to take me down, it's going to be in the middle, and he's going to get his leg kicked a few times before he even gets a shot off.
Gaethje came into this fight ranked number 5 in the UFC, and this win will likely propel him in the rankings. Time will tell if Nurmagomedov and the UFC will oblige. The UFC continues to make an impact on the city of Vancouver, as thousands were entertained by the efforts of the fighters. Canadian fans have proven their love for the UFC, with hopes of more fights to be seen in the future. Paul Aligato, Eagle News, 1 with 25.
That's this week's Eagle News. Join us next week for stories that matter to you. Visit our websites at eaglenews.net and eaglenewslive.com. Follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/eaglenews and on Facebook at facebook.com/eaglenews. Thank you for watching. I'm Thomas I. Likeness. I'm 1 with 25.